just think about it from this perspective. If you're running 10-year-old software today, you are absolutely vulnerable. Like, I guarantee it. If you just ran today's software for the next 10 years, I would also guarantee that you're going to be vulnerable. I've also seen firsthand that there are very few things that I haven't seen the hackers hack. Right? Give them enough time. And we're just talking about, like, the crowd, right? We're not even talking nation state. So password manager, multi-factor. And the third thing is keep your systems up to date. Keep your browser up to date. Keep your operating system up to date. Don't download nefarious software, right? Like, just make sure that you know the software that's running on your machine and that it's up to date. And if you do those three things, you are in pretty darn good shape. So I'd recommend there's something called Hack the Box. Hack the Box it's a website that has a bunch of challenges, and there's a lot of free information that you can get started with, and then you can eventually choose different paths where you want to do like red team, blue team type stuff, and you can see what you kind of like, what you're into, and then start going down, get maybe a certification from Hack the Box, and then use that to kind of get an entry level role. The biggest mistake, hiring the wrong people. Jesus, dude, that will f you up, man.
Hello and welcome back. Today, we are going to have an episode on cybersecurity. It is an episode that's way overdue on this podcast, considering the fact that on average, a cyber attack occurs every 39 seconds, and an unsecured computer online can be attacked over 2,000 times every single day. Concerning, right? Well, our guest today is on a unique mission to democratize the access to cybersecurity solutions of good quality for all businesses and individuals who would otherwise be unable to access these good solutions. Hello, Grant. How are you today?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for having me here.
For anyone watching who might not know you or what you do, who is Grant and what's his mission on planet Earth?
Sure. I've been in cybersecurity for a little over 13 years as a practitioner, as a security engineer, as an ethical hacker, as a bug bounty hunter, and then also as an executive. So I've kind of been on all different sides of the aisle. I've helped, just be on the security side. I've been on the client delivery side. I've been on the, again, sort of executive side as well. The spreadsheets and whatnot. So what I'm doing right now, right? I built this company called DarkHorse Security. After spending nearly 10 years at my last organization, I decided that, I was trying to figure out what to do next. And I was like, you know what, I'm pretty good at this stuff. I know how it works. I know how to build, good financial models around it. What if I built a model that made it accessible and affordable to all organizations? Because the solutions at my prior company, they cost anywhere from $10,000, $20,000, hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? So like you'd spend, it's pretty expensive for an organization to have access to penetration testing, bug bounties, vulnerability disclosure programs, and so on and so forth. And so I said, what if I built a platform that made it easy for people to set those things up, and as a function of that, also made them extremely affordable. And so that's fundamentally what I've built with DarkHorse. So that's kind of just what we're out here doing, is we're just making it easier for businesses to become secure.
Is it just for businesses or for individuals as well that can afford?
Yeah, so it's just businesses, right? So like, because your individual cybersecurity, right, is going to be very different than the cybersecurity that you provide for an organization. Now, I think maybe like crazy high net worth people are effectively like businesses, right? Like when you've got like that much attack surface or something like that. So I don't know, you could have like some sort of situation there, right? But most people, so for instance, say we're securing because when we're talking about like attack surface, I'm usually talking about like a network. I'm talking about an application of some sort, right? Whether that's web application, mobile application, or something like that, right? Most people don't just walk around and have like a personal web application that can be hacked, right? And so that's more of what we're securing. Now, you do still have vulnerabilities, at an individual level. But again, that's not really something we focus on. And those are fairly straightforward, right? If we're talking about, not to make a hard left, but right. But if you're an individual, it's not all that complicated. And I don't want to like over trivialize it, but it's not all that complicated to kind of reduce your probability of getting hacked.
Like a good antivirus software should suffice for individuals, right? Like a very strong, solid one.
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't. So, and somebody's probably going to hunt me down for saying this and tell me I'm super wrong. But personally, I'm not sure antivirus is as big of a thing as it was, 20 years ago, 20, 30 years ago.
How so?
Well, so my personal perspective on this, right, is you've got, back then everything was local, right? So for instance, you installed, everything was on your machine, right? You installed Word, you installed, you just all these different programs that you installed via CD-ROM or floppy disks or whatever you used at the time. You ran much more stuff from your machine. Like, think about how much you actually have installed on your machine right now. Like, back in the day, you're pirating video games or movies or stuff like that, right? Much higher probability of like downloading a virus or something like that. So if you're kind of engaging in those sorts of risky behaviors, maybe also you want an antivirus. But today's modern technology is mostly kind of more browser based and more it's just doing less stuff on your local machine. Now again, there's probably utility to an antivirus. I don't personally use an antivirus because if you're not, one, downloading questionable content from questionable locations, then you're pretty okay, right? Like, and also the Windows and Mac have done a lot better job at warning you when something's going to execute on your machine. It's like, you try to run something and it'll be like, doo-doo-doo, like, do you want to do this thing? Do you want to give this thing access to, your system? And it kind of tells you what it has the ability to do. Right. So again, you just have a lot more controls. Now, I'm not saying that's not, still useful. I'm just personally speaking, I don't do that. I think that from a personal level, if you're, again, just don't download weird things from weird locations. Don't click on links that you shouldn't click on. If you're going somewhere, validate where you're going, right? It's, if it says like make sure the URL checks out, right? And again, make sure that you trust but verify just about literally everything all the time, even more so today. And your software is up to date. So for instance, if you have out of date software, your browser, depending on what you're using, probably Chrome or some variant of Chromium, but it's going to have a little like update button in the upper right hand corner. It's going to be like, hey, like, it's time for you to update, and it'll start green and then it'll go yellow and then orange and then red. The longer you don't update it. So, I mean, you are vulnerable to like attacks there, but again, if you're keeping your systems up to date and you're not using the same passwords and you're not clicking on nefarious and malicious links or executing random files on your machine, you're generally going to be pretty secure, right? And if you're using most of like the standard software these days, right? Again, like even Spotify or whatever, right? You're not downloading, suspicious MP3s, and then you watch stuff on Netflix, and you're not downloading suspicious, movies, and you're playing games off Steam, and you're not, so like the probability of just downloading a malicious file is a lot lower. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. And again, I'm just ranting and rambling here, but because it's super important to call out that 60% over 60% of all breaches start at the human layer. As much as I love talking about, hacking networks and applications, right? A lot of it starts with hacking humans. Now, it's hacking humans in slightly different ways, right? Yeah, maybe you're hacking them to get access to a password or get access to a system or get them to, or like you convince them to execute a file or something to that effect. So hopefully that kind of characterizes it a little.
It does. And you know what, Grant? I would like us to marinate a little bit in this information you've just shared, because I wasn't necessarily intending to focus on the individual, but now you've done that. I was thinking, most of this would be small size businesses and everything, but I just want to make sure everyone listening to this gets this right, and some people don't go uninstall their antivirus or whatever they've got going on. So if I understand correctly, today in 2025, an individual can get by with a good computer that has software that's up to date, as long as they're careful with how they navigate the web, right? Always on the watch out for the websites they visit, for the files they download, and the default security you typically have on the OS operating systems like Microsoft Defender and things like that. That should be sufficient to protect users today, right?
And so again, somebody is probably going to pop out of the woodwork and they're going to be like, this guy's just like, but I'm speaking from the perspective of so, okay, where does the virus come from, right? So if we're just breaking it down, right? So like, how would your computer get a virus, right? And there's only one way it can really get a virus is if you download a malicious file and then you execute that malicious file, right? That's really it. Now, there's other potential vectors for getting in. For instance, if you have like an exposed service or something like that has a vulnerability in it that then allows the attacker to execute arbitrary files on your behalf, then again you're kind of screwed. Usually though, that's a function of having an out-of-date piece of software. Now there's sometimes you can't prevent these things, right? Just so we're clear on this. Like for instance, you'll hear about zero click or some types of vulnerabilities that they're fairly rare, right? But sometimes there'll be these crazy vulnerabilities that organization or that hackers will find and they'll start exploiting, where potentially you visit a website and they're able to get code execution, and that's due to a vulnerability in your browser, right? So that kind of, yes, it had something to do in the fact that like you went to a bad website, but you can't really stop that, right? And even AV can't really stop there. It just, because again, it's executing within the context of the browser. So as far as AV is concerned, it's just your browser doing something that you already gave your browser permission to do whatever to your machine, right? Be able to run commands. And so if you're able to hijack the browser and execute commands as if you're the browser, then it doesn't. Again, antivirus isn't going to do anything against that because it just thinks it's the browser. Again, not raging against antivirus. If you want antivirus, go for it. If you think your computer's, my personal approach is there's and especially, so there's a couple different ways that you can approach this. If you do want to engage in nefarious behavior, or go to nefarious sites or do nefarious, things, my recommendation would be to run that in a virtual machine, which is not at all hard to do these days. And what a virtual machine is it's literally what it sounds like. It's a container inside of your machine that acts just like your normal operating system, but whatever's inside that container can't get out. Now, of course, there are sandbox escapes or stuff like that, where again, you can't do anything about this other than not downloading malicious files inside of your VM, but very rarely people can escape those, again, these are crazy vulnerabilities. For instance, there was an organization I worked with, offering $1 million if people are able to do this kind of thing. Right. So big money if you've got like a hypervisor escape or something that allows you to like escape from a virtual machine or something like that. Like that's worth just stupid amounts of money. That's like nation state level. And again, not much you can do at that point.
That's a good one. The virtual machine thing.
Yeah, if you're gonna do something suspect, right? But again, like fundamentally, that's how a lot of these things are built even now, right? Your browser operates within kind of a sandbox. A lot of these applications work within sandboxes, and from like on iOS, a lot of those applications are sandboxed, right? By default, it just sandboxes it. So like, just because you have an application on your device doesn't mean that it can just like arbitrarily go out and do whatever it wants to your file system or anything else that's running on your phone. And again, that's kind of the way it should be, right? Is things are a little sandboxed from each other. So, long story short, again, I'm not raging against antivirus. I'm just saying that in the context of today's world, you're not really downloading a bunch of suspicious binaries. Now, again, people might be doing it. And when I say binaries, I mean like files. People might be doing it. If you're going to do that in a VM, a virtual machine. Don't go doing that on your main machine. But again, I'm just looking at like the tabs I have open, right? I've got like, don't use Photoshop. I use Canva. In Canva's a tab, right? And so it just operates within the context of, so I don't have Photoshop installed. I don't have, Word installed. You use Google Docs. I don't have like all these different, things. And then again, it's not that hard to like make sure you're downloading the right file from the right people. And so if you're not otherwise downloading and executing files, then you shouldn't really have a lot of exposure to viruses on your machine. Now, again, it happens. It absolutely happens. But and if you think you've got the probability to do that, or you just want that extra layer of protection, go for it. Right? There's nothing wrong with running an antivirus. I'm not, in my view, antivirus is not the main way you're going to get hacked viruses are not the main way you're going to get hacked today as an individual, right? So everything's cloud-based, right? And again, there's some stuff you run locally, fine, whatever, right? I say like you run Spotify on your machine, you run, I don't know, I'm just looking at what's open here. Like you have your browser, you have Spotify, whatever it is, Apple Music, you're not installing a ton of stuff. Anyways, but what you do have is a gazillion online accounts, right? So you've got your, I don't know, I'm just trying to think of like things people use. You've got your Reddit account, you've got your Pinterest, I don't know, all these other,
you've got access to your bank accounts these days online as well. Yeah, the
all
browser.
That stuff, right?
And your cryptocurrencies and everything, you could be accessing them via some browser. And there are some apps that allow you to download, an interface to manage your cryptocurrencies. So you can have an individual, just managing millions of dollars on their private computer. So let's put that into perspective when we come up with solutions, right?
Sure. So how are you going to get hacked there, right? And again, all bets are off if you're downloading nefarious files, right? Again, just don't do that, right? But otherwise, the way you're probably going to get hacked is somebody, being able to guess your credentials, right? So for instance, your bank, right? So if I have your username and password, I'm potentially able to just log in and do whatever I want with whatever your accounts are, right? So one of the big mistakes that people make is reusing the same password in the same places or in different places over and over again, right? And what happens as a function of that is that if you use the same password everywhere, one of those sites is going to get hacked, right? And one of those sites is probably not going to store your information correctly, and the hackers are going to be able to have access to the plain text password for whatever reasons. Again, lots of problems have to happen along stream, but if they have your username and password in one place and you use the same username and password everywhere, you are toast everywhere. right? And so that's what we call a credential stuffing attack, is where hackers will take a known repository of username passwords and they'll just throw it at different websites and see what gets them access. And so that's absolutely how people, for instance, you mentioned banks and stuff like that. There was a few months ago, there was a situation in Australia where people lost their retirement accounts to that exact type of attack. It was just a cred stuffing attack, right? And so they're like, and so you say, okay, I want to hack Newton, right? So like, I don't think it would be that hard to figure out what your personal email is. And so in some places you log in with your email, some places you log in with your password. And so, I mean, first off, if I could just get access to your email, it's game over for everything, right? Because if I've got your email, I can do a password reset on anything. And anytime it's like, hey, was this actually you? Where does that go? It goes to your email, right? So super important that your email is secure, because if you have access to someone's email, you effectively have access to every one of their accounts, on generalized basis. Well, think about it, right? I mean, just think about it, right? So if I go to your bank's website, now, in some cases, maybe you've got to have some other level of good sites, right? Will require some additional multi-factor, right? They'll be like, okay, but you also have to give us a code, or they'll send something to your cell phone or something like that, right?
MFA, multi-factor authentication thing.
Yeah, but if you just go to a random website and you click on forgot password, what does it tell you to do? It says enter your email, right? And then it sends you a link at your email. You click on that, and then you can change your password to whatever you want, and then you can go log in, and that's it, right? So like if somebody has access to your email, they have access to just a lot of stuff downstream.
I think I misunderstood. You mean access to their inbox of their email, right?
Yes.
Not just access to what the email is.
No, absolutely.
I was concerned there for a bit.
No.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. I can see how that happens. Yeah, sometimes they also send a password link to a phone number or something, but yeah, most times it's email.
So the first way that a lot of users are getting popped, right, or like you can prevent your probability of getting popped, is just having strong passwords. And that means using a password manager, right? So you have a unique and strong password every single place that you log in, right? There's LastPass, there's Keeper, there's 1Password, tons of different options, right? And some of them are free.
So you're a proponent of this password managers. I've been kind of skeptical about them. I haven't really been using anyone, because I just haven't done my research to understand how secure and safe they are. So you kind of for that, right?
Yes, and I recommend not LastPass, 1Password. 1Password, from my perspective, is the most. They're super serious about like the cryptographic security of your information. For instance, when you first set up 1Password, you get like an emergency key or code or something like that. Like you can never, like, if you lose that, it doesn't matter. Like you cannot, like, and it like tells you when you're setting it up. It's like, if you lose this, it's not like you can call support and be like, unlock it for me. They can't do that. Like they don't.
So 1Password is the name of the password manager solution, right? It's called 1Password. Okay.
1Password.
Is it like a subscription based thing, or is it
subscription
free for download online?
So no, they charge. LastPass, I think you can use on your browser for free. But yeah, 1Password does cost. It's a relatively small expense, and again, given that we're more cloud based than like local based, I would recommend spending money on a password manager instead of an antivirus. That's just my 2 cents. Because again, that's where the majority of your exposure is online, right? It's not on your machine, right? Like, for instance, think of like Chromebooks, right? What is a Chromebook? A Chromebook, like, and like, you could give me a machine that has no apps installed on it whatsoever, aka a Chromebook, and I'd be perfectly fine, right? Because everything's in the browser, right? So like everything is like cloud and browser based. And so you can access Slack in a browser. Slack is effectively like a browser. You could access, GitHub and all these other things, right? Just all through the browser, right? It's not, so protecting your internet security, I think at this point, at least in my view, I don't want to dismiss securing your local machine. Again, keep it up to date. I don't know if you care if I swear or whatnot.
Open flow.
I was going to say, keep that shit up to date.
When people think about hacking, they often think of something so technical that they cannot understand it themselves, right? But you're saying most of that actually happens, from just something as not managing your passwords properly or using the same passwords on multiple sites, right? Something as simple as social engineering type of hacking, where you make some clumsy mistakes and maybe you type your password during a screen sharing session. And some of these small things which are not too technical, most of the hacking happens this way. I just want to echo that and just make sure people hear this. It's not always an expert, looking at your packet flowing through the router and switches that's actually breaking into your computer. It might be just you being clumsy or making poor choices.
Honestly,
which nothing can save you from. If we look at it, the best antivirus in the world cannot save you from you handing over your password on a plate to somebody asking for it.
You remind me of something. If you do download a suspicious file before you execute it, you can go upload it to sites like VirusTotal, and they'll run it through like all the different AVs concurrently, right? So like that's also one way. So if there's a
virustotal.com,
yeah.
Okay.
And if there's a binary I don't really trust, I'll run it through there, and then of course also I'll run it in a VM. But just putting that out there. But yeah, to your point, right? So Verizon every year puts out this data breach. It's called the DBIR, I think. Data breach and incident response. I don't know. Anyway, so but they put out this report on data breaches, and again, what they put in the most recent report is that over 60% of data breaches start at the human layer. Like you called it out, social engineering, these sorts of things, right? And there's a lot of different ways this can happen. So for instance, we've all gotten texts that say like, "Hi, it's your CEO. Send me like $200 or whatever," but like, really good. Like if you're actually trying to target an organization, you're going to be a little more sophisticated than that. In terms of for instance, if you're, and this is where we get into like enterprise security, but there's you can do mail spoofing and other things that like, again, as an organization, you can do preventative measures that will prevent those sorts of things or lower the likelihood of some of those attacks.
Grant, on your own personal computer, what security do you have?
Just the stuff that I'm talking about here. So literally, I don't run like an AV. Again, like I'll use like VirusTotal, and if I think that like something's been infected, like on my wife's computer or something like that, I'll usually run like Malwarebytes. I'll just download it and install and run it and be like, okay, like looks like you're clean, right? So if I suspect something has happened, right, I'll go that route, but I don't leave it running 24/7. I don't know. There's a part of me that I'm not sure how archaic it is, right? Back in the days of spindle hard drives and limited CPU resources, I always saw antiviruses as like these resource hogs, which they were, right? If it's constantly scanning your hard drive and you're running a 7,200 RPM hard drive, then it's always like eating up some of that space that could otherwise be used for, having a faster machine. So I generally have never loved antiviruses. Again, I don't have a vendetta against them. If that's, if it makes you sleep better at night, use it. But what do I personally do? Again, it's a password manager. It's enforcing multi-factor. It's not doing crazy things. And critically, it's keeping everything up to date, because as a hacker, one of the things that, I've been on, all sorts of networks and such. And when you're able to hack into a machine on a network, 9 times out of 10, I mean, it's one of a very few things. One like is default credentials, right? That'll get you in. Or you go look up, like, for instance, I was on this network that had a lot of like they're called like PLCs, like programmable logic controllers that they control lights and water and all this stuff, right? And you're on this network, and so you go look up, you're like, oh, okay, so like you go Google what's the default password for this PLC, and then you put that in and it works, and then you're able to get access to this unit, right? So again, just poor hygiene as far as like just maintaining units, and then or they're not kept up to date. For instance, there's a lot of, when you're hacking Linux or Windows installs, or even some Mac stuff to some extent, one of the things that you do when you're looking at a machine is you try to fingerprint it, and fingerprinting is like knowing kind of what the different versions of the software are, and so if it's running some service or some vulnerable version of this operating system, then that's where the vulnerabilities are. If you're all patched and up to date, the odds of you having a vulnerability are pretty low, or an exploitable vulnerability are pretty low, because as soon as Microsoft or whoever is aware of the vulnerability, they're going to put out a patch for that thing. And then, so if you just keep your, there are very brief windows, right? So for instance, we've had things like Shell Shock, Log4j, stuff like that, right? Where those vulnerabilities come out and nobody's ready, and you don't have like a good fix for, anywhere from, 24 to like 72 hours. And like, it's the Wild West during those times. Because
you've got those 0-day attacks. Those 0-day attacks,
exactly,
where a new version of a software comes out with a vulnerability and no one notices before it's too late.
Yeah, I mean, it's less about like a new version comes out, and it's more about somebody just finds a wild vulnerability in something that's been around for like decades, and you're like, oh snap, like we gotta fix this. And so there's usually a fix pretty instantly. Usually it's like disable the service or something like that, or disable, this sort of module or something like that. But yeah, and so, but if organizations aren't on top of that, again, sometimes you can't there's nothing you could do, right? Because like if that 0-day comes out and you're like first on somebody's list, you're screwed, right? Like that we didn't have time to react. Usually again, vendors will try to orchestrate some sort of patch before a vulnerability, information about the vulnerability is released. But again, you can't really control that when it's done by malicious actors. So I don't remember exactly how we got on this tangent.
I do. And I would like to restart the tangent from somewhere.
Sure.
You mentioned something very interesting. You said, when you suspect something is off or amiss, then you go download, you said Malwarebytes, and then you run that just to check and make sure everything is working fine on, I think, your wife's computer.
Yeah. I've never had a bad experience with Malwarebytes, so that's just kind of what I use. You could probably use any antivirus or something similar to that. I think that's kind of like a different kind of malware is a more broad term than virus, right? And again, antivirus stands for more than just viruses, right? Because like the idea with a virus is like it's self-propagating and it tries to like go from one to the next, it tries to like, whereas like malware is not always orchestrated in that manner, right? Malware is just anywhere that be bad, right? And so it's just a larger category, but again, it doesn't really matter.
Word on the street is that small businesses get attacked more often than the larger ones. Is this something you agree with, or you have seen with your company?
It's hard to say. I mean, I'm not really on the forensic side of the house, so I don't look at like how often are you being attacked or how often are organizations being attacked. I know that small businesses, especially like small like businesses that have some sort of like SaaS infrastructure or like software infrastructure or something like that, right? They're probably, they're relatively easy targets, right? There's very few applications that I've ever encountered that like have no vulnerabilities, right? So, and especially if you're dealing with an organization that doesn't have any security team, that your odds of finding a vulnerability, right? So somebody just, especially in today's age of like AI and vibe coding, right? Like how easy is it to spin up some app, right? That, you're just like, oh, okay. And you don't consider some edge case or some, how vulnerabilities could potentially be exploited. And then you put that up and now you've got, some potential exposure.
Let's say a business listening to this unsure of just how powerful their security is at the moment, right? How would you propose they go check this out? Is it like hiring some pen testing expert, or how would anyone watching this, let's also add in that they have a small budget to work with. They're just wondering, okay, I don't know, my business sells pancakes on Sundays, right? But we're making $1 million every single year. We haven't installed any antivirus or whatever. It's not properly managed, the security. And we would like to test, number one, to see if we've already been hacked, because I understand that when hackers hack into systems, they might lurk in there for months, maybe even years. So how can these businesses go check, first of all, that their current infrastructure is safe, and how can they fortify it afterwards?
Okay. So really quickly, before we make the full transition to businesses, I want to just finalize the personal security aspect. I just want to say, one, use a password manager. Don't use the same password in multiple places, and use extremely strong passwords. Password managers, you just have to remember the password to your password manager, and then you're good on top of that.
On the password managers, I know a lot of people don't like paying for subscriptions. Would you say they can go with the free version of the password manager? Is that good enough?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
There are free versions. Okay. Yes.
So password manager. Yep.
I just think 1Password, I'm willing to pay the premium just because like of how serious they take security. But so one, that's again, in today's cloud-based world, that's one of the major ways you're going to get hacked. Two, have multi-factor authentication on everything that you can have it on, or everything that's sensitive. Right. So if you don't really care about your Pinterest, okay, fine. Don't maybe use multi-factor there, especially if you don't I'm not telling you not to use multi-factor. I'm saying it may not be as essential to you, but obviously the official line is use multi-factor on everything. You can kind of use your own judgment to decide where you want multi-factor. Absolutely on anything sensitive, banking, financial, whatever, right? So when we talk about multi-factor, if you're serious about multi-factor, don't use your phone number because there's SIM swapping attacks and stuff like that.
Really?
Yes. So there's a great video online that Veritasium did, where he did it with Linus Tech Tips, where he I think for like $7,000 or some relatively small amount, he was able to get an account that allowed him to like SIM swap numbers, and he was able to steal this guy's phone number and his text messages. So one. So if it's super serious, and again, if you can use it, it's better than nothing. And if you're just a user, you're not like super at risk. If you've got $10,000 in your bank account, maybe you're not as, high of, if you've got millions of dollars.
What about those authentication apps? Like, that Google authentication thing where it gives you a code and they secure. Is that higher up the security?
Way higher. Yep.
Hierarchy than phone numbers, right?
Yeah. And again, I'm not telling you to go run out and change it, and something's better than nothing. But that phone level, right? Adding any multi-factor is still better than having no multi-factor, because a lot of attackers are going to, even if they get their username and password, right, they're still going to be banging up against that multi-factor. So at a bare minimum, right, just having that phone number is better than nothing. Using an authenticator app, which generates one-time passwords or OTP codes, that is superior to using a phone number, because no attacker can get access to that, because that is only on your phone. It's only on that specific app. That's why they'll always say, never give out these codes to anyone, kind of thing. So anyway, so use password manager, multi-factor, and the third thing is keep your systems up to date. Keep your browser up to date. Keep your operating system up to date. Don't download nefarious software, right? Like just make sure that the software that's running on your machine and that it's up to date. And if you do those three things, you are in pretty darn good shape. Again, don't click or do anything that you shouldn't. That's just kind of table stakes. And if we have to add like a fourth one, that would be it.
We live in a time where some people think, oh, I do not have no money in the bank. I do not have cryptocurrency. I do not have real estate or something that I can lose overnight. But they forget that their identity alone can be just as valuable. We live in a time where people can steal your name, credentials, date of birth, and some other important information, and they can go take out credit on your name, right? And you wake up and you find out you have a debt that for your next generation will be unable to pay all that debt away. So just by the mere fact that you're a human with an identity, you should be well protected as best as possible. Do you agree with this, Grant?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, don't treat anything as all your information is valuable. And to that effect, right? Maybe it's worth signing up for some sort of credit monitoring too. I think that's pretty much free. The like basic credit monitoring. Usually when there's a data breach and you're part of that breach, say for instance, T-Mobile or like Equifax or one of those, right? They usually say, hey, you're part of a data breach or whatever, to help you be secure, to help protect your identity, we've provided, free access to Experian Credit Watch or something like that. I don't know. And I don't even know if that's the name of what it's called, but you can sign up for those services for free. And then every month it'll give you an update. Hey, your information was used for these sort of credit things. There's like paid versions of that too.
Yeah, I've got a free version of one. I think it's called Credit Karma. It's just a simple app. It does is just tells you your credit without having to check or run a check. It just checks automatically and keeps you informed. So every week I get an update. If someone performs a hard or soft check on my account, things like that, I get notified, and it's all free. I don't even use it at all. Yeah,
that's a good way to like kind of stay on top of that information.
There's this belief that anything that's connected to the internet with sufficient time can be hacked. Some very good hackers tend to believe that, anything at all can be hacked. I mean, if highly secured servers, including those of NASA, have been hacked by young teenagers, do you agree that anything that's connected to the internet has some risk of being attacked? So by cybersecurity, we are just trying to prevent as much damage as possible by protecting ourselves, but it will never be 100% protection. What do you think about that? Can something be protected 100% online?
I think I agree with the assertion that with enough, there's a famous quote by Balthazar Gracian. It goes, me and time versus any two, right? And basically it's that, time is undefeated, right? And in that same context, right, as if we look at software today, I'm reasonably confident in saying that. So for instance, if you're running, just think about it from this perspective. If you're running 10-year-old software today, you are absolutely vulnerable. Like I guarantee it. So if you just ran today's software for the next 10 years, I would also guarantee that you're going to be vulnerable. I've also seen firsthand that there are very few things that I haven't seen hackers hack. Right? Give them enough time,
Really?
incentive, money. Yeah. I mean, so again, I run thousands and thousands of like bug bounty programs, penetration tests, and stuff like that. And very rarely are you going to see something that like doesn't have vulnerabilities. And so, and again, the really good hackers, and we're just talking about like, the crowd, right? We're not even talking nation state, right? So like, do I believe that, I don't know, if the NSA wanted to like get into my computer or phone or something like that, like if I was like a top priority for them, they could do it, right? I'm sure there's like stuff that they've got that like we don't have a prayer against, right?
Now, speaking about enterprises, businesses, particularly those working with a small budget, right? They're looking to evaluate their current security posture just to understand how or where they stand security-wise. What would you suggest are some first measures they could take to check?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing, right, is, as we've talked about already, the human layer, right? So if 60% of breaches or over 60% of breaches start at a human layer, right? One of the most cost-effective things that you could do, and I think this carries downstream a little bit further than even just 60%, because if you're able to get the whole organization being security conscious and security kind of as something that's top of mind, one, you're going to knock out that 60%, but you're also going to reduce the probability of vulnerabilities that exist in software or, that get written into code, right? Because they're thinking about security. So, the absolute first place to start for every organization is at the human layer, right? And just making sure that everybody understands how security intersects with their role, right? Within the organization, right? Because like it's a little different for everybody, right? The way that an engineer approaches security is a little different than how someone in finance would, or HR, right? You all have the probability or the potential to create a breach, right? It's just different breaches of different nature in different ways. And so that's the first thing, right? Securing that human layer. And the way you do that, right, is all those things we already talked about, right? So if you make sure that they're all executing on those personal level things, again, one more time, password hygiene, password managers, multi-factor authentication, keeping their stuff up to date, and making sure they're not doing stupid things with on their machine, then you've covered a big swath of your exposure. Now, from there, the second thing you want to do as an organization is make sure you have an understanding of all your assets, right? So you've got assets, and it just depends on, and your exposure is going to depend on your threat model and kind of your exposure. So, for instance, if you're an organization that if you just operate out of like a Shopify store, right, your probability of getting hacked is at the app layer via Shopify is pretty low, because Shopify has a lot of security and there's a lot of stuff they do on their end, right? And then you're using QuickBooks on the back end. Again, QuickBooks is probably not going to have a bunch of vulnerabilities that are going to, you're going to be exploited by, because again, QuickBooks is actively kind of fixing their stuff. So your risks then mostly exist kind of at the human layer and the configuration layer, right? So like if you misconfigure your QuickBooks, or you overshare some document or artifact, or you misconfigure how your Shopify store runs or something like that allows someone to be able to have a vulnerability. For instance, a misconfiguration on the Shopify front could be not having a good password, right? And so somebody's able to breach in that way, or they're able to get access to your emails or something like that, right? So now, but at some point you're gonna have a network, right? Potentially like an internal network as your business kind of grows, and you have 10, 15 computers on that network, and they're all talking to each other, right? You want to make sure that then, so if you have an understanding of all the different machines that are on there, right, it helps a lot. And one thing that you can do and should do is, as your organization grows, you install some sort of mobile device management, right? So ideally they're using your laptops, they have sanctioned apps on their phone if so. But you know what's on those laptops, right? Because what you don't want is if everybody's just bringing their own devices and whatnot, you don't know what else is running on their machines. Potentially, they already have some sort of malware running on their machine that then has access to your data as a function of your data being on that machine. So you want some sort of mobile device management that allows you to control who has access to or what machines can install what pieces of software, what they have access to, so on and so forth. And so doing that, that
makes sense. What about pen testers, hiring pen testers?
Yep. So that's the exact next layer, right? So once you have a good understanding of what your exposure is, because if you just hire a pen tester and you could, these steps can be interchanged, but like say you don't have a good understanding of what's on your network, right? Or like where your exposure is. Say for instance, IT's spinning up, rogue shadow IT stuff, or marketing's doing that or something, right? If you don't know that exists, you're not going to know to pen test it, which means that it's potentially going to get, and of course, as part of your pen test, right, you could have some sort of reconnaissance thing where you have the pen testers identify all the different places of exposure. But you need to know that. You need to know that we don't really know what's out there. So we want you to look at everything, which is going to be a different type of pen test as opposed to like, just look at our application, right? So anyway, if you have an app...
pen testing, for anyone who might not know what that is, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. It's where you have a qualified security professional try to ethically hack, as it were, whatever the scope is. So if it's a network, they're trying to hack into machines on the network. If it's a web application, they're trying to hack into the web application, mobile application, so on and so forth. And so they're looking for vulnerabilities via however you've kind of provided it. And you can also have social engineering, pen testing, and so on and so forth. So that is fundamentally what pen testing is. But yeah, that's also kind of the next layer, right? Is doing some sort of scan, right? Or getting sort of proactive with your security is what we kind of term it in the industry. And so, and this is where DarkHorse comes into play. But so for instance, in the hierarchy I recommend as an organization is that you typically run a scan of some sort, right? There's free scanners for web applications. There's free scanners for networks. I recommend using those first, right? So scan, see what the low-hanging fruit is, knock out that low-hanging fruit. Then you can do like a security assessment, or you can do a penetration test, and so on and so forth. And you can kind of just move up through the chain as things go on. And you want to do that regularly and at repeated intervals to make sure that you're identifying vulnerabilities.
These free scanners, the companies can download this from the internet and just run them, and they will identify assets or nodes within your large organizations that might be vulnerable, right?
Yeah, you can point it at like a network and tell it to go do that. Usually it's like at a specific host. So you'll have to do a little bit of tooling in terms of like, what are all the different machines on your network, and then have it go like scan those different machines. But that, from a network perspective, a free version of that, right? There's like paid versions, expensive paid versions, such as like Nessus is kind of the gold standard as it relates to sort of scanning network infrastructure. But you could also use like OpenVOS is a free one. Again, if you're budget constrained, that's kind of what I'm speaking to here. That's something that'll you can deploy it and it'll try to identify vulnerabilities that way. And then if you have a web application, you can use something like ZAP, Z Attack Proxy. That's put out by the OWASP Foundation, which will help sort of identify some low-hanging fruit as it relates to web applications, so on and so forth. So those are some of the free tools that I'd recommend using. And then again, you knock out that low-hanging fruit, then you bring in a pen tester or a qualified security engineer on top of that, who's, you have them do a logic test, right? Or a business logic vulnerability test, where they're looking for vulnerabilities in sort of a methodological way, that can potentially be used against your organization.
If I understand correctly, DarkHorse, where it comes into the picture, if you are contacted by these businesses, you can help them coordinate all these things at the different layers of security, right?
Yep.
And you mentioned something, proactive security. I think that's what you and your company is big on.
Yeah, and so So proactive security is this bulk term that encompasses in security it's typically broken out into like red team and blue team, where like red team's offensive security and blue team is defensive security. And so, defensive security is like installing antivirus or things like that, right? Where you're like trying to like detect attacks and stuff like that. Where red team is trying to perform attacks and identify things in that way. This idea of proactive security, I like it because it's a better encapsulation of things. It doesn't just like split it out, red team, blue team, right? You're being proactive with your security, right? And there's a lot of different things that you can do to be proactive, but it's changing the perspective, right? At least in my mind, right? Where you're kind of, instead of being reactive, right? So for instance, if we're looking at something like an antivirus or something like that, right? That's reactive. It sits there until there's a vulnerability or like there's something that, there's somebody tries to execute a malicious executable and you're like, nah, don't do that. Proactive security is saying, okay, what can we do to get in front of these kinds of things, right? And so it's proactively proactive security includes like understanding your attack surface, understanding where each one of those different assets are in terms of like their prioritization and their potential vulnerabilities and so on and so forth. And then you can go about like remediating those issues. So what DarkHorse does is we provide access to penetration testers and ethical hackers and stuff of that nature that can help you run like a vulnerability scan. If that's what you need, we can perform vulnerability assessments with humans looking for active vulnerability stuff that scanners can't find, just so we're clear on that. And there's a lot of it. There's a lot of stuff that like AI can't find, right? Even, in some of these more like nuanced AI solutions and whatnot. And then, penetration testing. Whether again you're pen testing a network or series of devices, or you're testing an application or whatever it is.
Does DarkHorse also have a trademark software solution that can be installed?
So it's not installed, right? Kind of everything like I talked about earlier, right? It's cloud, right? Yeah. So what DarkHorse does that's uniquely different than anybody else is that typically these services are sold in a consultative model, right? So typically the way that you're going to get access to a penetration tester is you go to your like Deloitte or PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, Ernst & Young, EY, Deloitte, right? You're going to say, hey, I need a penetration test. And they're going to be like, okay, well, let's go through this lengthy negotiation process and we'll charge you a bunch of money. And then we'll, go through all these hoops and layers. And eventually you'll get somebody that does the work. And maybe they're not the best person for the job because, they're just the next person we had available on our list, right? What DarkHorse does is we got rid of all that. We said, okay, we're not going to make you talk to anybody. You can just come in, answer a few questions, and we'll give you a quote on a pen test or an assessment or whatever you need, right? And so it's all very easy. And so if you need a pen test and you need it tomorrow, we can do that for you. You can't do that with a consultant or a consulting organization, right? We make it very fast and efficient. As a function of that being fast and efficient, right? That self-service flow, onboarding flow, we're able to cut out a ton of cost. We don't have all those extra layers involved, which then saves you a bunch of money along the way. So it's faster in terms of getting results. It's easier because we make it very quick and simple to do, and then it's efficient and cost or more affordable, just because again we are able to save you a bunch of money along the way, and while still retaining high quality resources, right? Like it's not like you get. The way we're able to offer it for cheap is like because we just use like some guy we're paying $1.50 to. No, like we're using high quality testers that produce high quality output. We're just getting rid of all the other people that get in the way of delivering quality solutions.
If I am an individual and I just want to consult you for better security, will you accept me?
Yeah, I mean, I want, like, if you've got a question, let's have a conversation, right? That's not what we do natively, right? Like my consultation would be pretty much exactly what we've done on this podcast. I would say the exact same things. I'd be like, are you using a password manager? Let's check your device for any malware. And like, if there's no malware currently on your device, then you're okay. Just don't do anything stupid. And then, make sure everything's up to date using a password manager multi-factor, and then we'd just be on our way.
How do you see the demand for cybersecurity professionals in, let's say, in the next 5 years, Grant?
Whew. I mean, everything points to the right and up, right? So, if we're looking at like a graph, if you look at like the compound annual growth rate, the CAGR for cybersecurity, pen testing, all of them, right? Double digits in terms of annualized growth, right? Compounded annualized growth. And so all those fields are expanding. More people are going to need it. Now, and paradoxically, right, the advent of AI has actually been like a boon for security. It's not like replacing security jobs because AI has introduced more vulnerabilities than it's solved. Right?
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like, for instance, you have like prompt injection, and then you've got like all sorts of like data sharing issues and just vulnerabilities that arise as a function of AI. And AI itself is not like removing the vulnerabilities, right? In fact, it's helping people write code faster, which increases the probability of more vulnerabilities going out there more quickly, right? And so I haven't really seen. I mean, there's some places that offer like automated pen testing or whatnot, but it's still not as effective as a human. And so so I don't see. I mean, some roles are getting kind of replaced, but I think that it's more augmentative, right? You use it as a companion, right? Everybody calls it a co-pilot. That's what it is here too in security. So where does it go? Up and to the right, in my view. Obviously, I'm biased. I want it to go up and to the right. So
I'm sure that information will be welcomed by quite a lot of people. That the cybersecurity field, it's quite protected, at least a little bit better than some other fields.
I would caveat it with, I don't know anything. I have no crystal ball. We don't know. Yeah. A few years
quite
from now.
Humble and
well, are we going to be in the middle of World War III in 5 years? I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. But like, what happens when that happens? I don't know. Like, nothing matters then, right?
Let's say someone listening to this, Grant, is a non-tech in some field, different field entirely. Let's say medicine, I don't know, law, and they're looking to get into cybersecurity, but to fast track their career, right? From an entry-level position, let's just keep it random. It could be any entry level to a top position in cybersecurity. I know you're not necessarily a career coach, but you've been meddling in this field for quite a long time. Let's say you yourself, if you were to just, own this field, what would you do? Starting from how would you prepare? Where would you get in? And what would you do within the next few years just so you capitalize off the time you have?
Sure. I actually am giving a talk on like career advice at GSX in New Orleans, in GSX's Global Cybersecurity Exchange in late September, maybe October, somewhere around there. So I love talking about this. I love helping people. I love helping, people get into cybersecurity. I love doing trainings and stuff like that. Where would I recommend starting? You generally got two paths, right? We talked about it kind of earlier. There's the red team, blue team type situation. So you kind of want to figure out where you want to go with that. So I'd recommend going to, there's something called Hack the Box. Hack the Box has, it's a website that has a bunch of challenges, and there's a lot of free information that you can get started with. And then, you can eventually choose different paths where you want to do like red team, blue team, type stuff. And you can see what you kind of like, what you're into. And then, start going down, get maybe a certification from Hack the Box, and then use that to kind of get an entry level role. I'm a big fan of like, at my last company, I was the lowest paid role in the entire company. Like I made peanuts, but I grinded at it, and And then I turned that into a customer facing role. And then I started just solving problems. And then I started managing teams. And by the time I left, I was running a global team of over 100 people, right? So I'm a big fan of, you're not too good for anything. Right. And I even have that mentality today, right. With DarkHorse, right. I try to make sure that I don't know anything. Right. And that I'm not too good for any opportunity, or to learn and to grow. And so you kind of have to have a long view on it, right? If you're going in and you're like, I got to make, 6 figures out the gate, it's probably the wrong attitude. If you're just going in for the money or something like that, you've got to have a long view. If you have a long view, you're going to get a shot, right? So, and if you want a shot, reach out to me, right? I'm happy to, right? What I tell you to do is I tell you to go. You want to become an ethical hacker? Okay, go work on Hack the Box, right? Go show me you get one of those certifications, and then what I'll do is I'll give you an opportunity. I won't make you a lead on a pen test, but I'll let you double up on a pen test that somebody else is already doing. So we already have like the principal doing the pen test and whatnot. Go ahead, show me what you can do, right? Prove yourself, right? Can you find vulnerabilities they missed, right? Can you find 80%, 90% of what they found, right? Okay, let's figure out where that gap is and then let's grow, right? And so,
you don't look at university qualifications and all that stuff. You're more about practical knowledge, a portfolio. What have you done?
Yeah, in cybersecurity, it's funny, man. I very rarely does having I see all these people with like a master's in cybersecurity or something like that. I mean, it very rarely does that equate to like being good at cybersecurity. It just means that they were able to answer a bunch of questions on a test. Like that does not make you a hacker at all. And a lot of that stuff, I haven't had a chance to like kind of go into the curriculum, but like, I'm not sure they're teaching the best information at like in terms of like
academia, like, right?
Yeah. And again, I'm not shitting on academia just for fun, right? I'm just saying like the people that come in and like have masters in cybersecurity, I'm generally not particularly impressed by their like, just like practical knowledge, right? Like, and I'm sure they know a lot of things that I don't, right? Just so we're super clear on that.
Final question. It's kind of a tradition on the podcast. If you don't mind sharing, let's say, a mistake you're not very proud of. I mean, no one is proud of any mistake, right? But let's say the most impactful mistake you've ever had in your entire career life. So this is a career-related mistake. Can you share one such huge mistakes you've made? And if you could go back in time, you would definitely change that one first?
That's a good question. I'm going to need a minute. So I'm trying to think of like, I'm sure there have been things that felt big in the moment. There's nothing that really stands out to me right now as like a giant mistake. I mean, shit. Okay. Fuck. The biggest mistake, hiring the wrong fucking people. Jesus, dude, that will fuck you up, man. And you can hear my language got more colorful just because like I'm playing out some of these people that I hired.
Is it hiring people into top positions or junior roles?
Anywhere at all, man. You hire the wrong fucking person and they will make your life hell, right? So like, and that's one of the reasons why.
Give us one example, Grant.
Well, the reason I left, one of the big reasons I left my last role was because like, when you're managing 100 people, right, there's always some people that are causing problems or something like that. And my life just became like, I'm dealing with personnel issues nonstop, right? Somebody's always complaining about something and this person's throwing a fit and you bring the wrong people in and they
spoil the rest.
Yeah, they don't just stay in isolation. They're like unhappiness, right? Well, they'll infect other people. Their low performance potentially drags everybody else down, right? Like it's just, again, it's not just like, it's not obvious, right? It's not always obvious where like, it's not just negativity either, right? It's like, there's a lot of different ways people can be bad employees, but it costs you so much. And like, I don't know where you're located, but
UK?
Okay. Yeah. It's probably pretty hard to fire people in the UK too, right? Most Western countries, you got to go through a whole fucking process, man, where like, you're just like, oh shit, like this is going to be bad. This person's got to get out, but you can't just do that, right? You got to go like collect all this documentation and you got to put them on a PIP. And then you gotta, go through all these different layers that cost tons of your time and resources, and mentally and emotionally, it is just draining, right? Because they suck the life out of you when you're dealing, because if somebody really wants to be a pain, they can be a fucking pain. And
I know.
And so, yeah, the biggest mistake, without question, hiring the wrong fucking people. You have to guard that shit with your like soul, where like, you're like, I would rather not have someone on the team than have a toxic, I'd rather just drown in the work than it's just bad.
This seems to be such a profound lesson, Grant. I just don't want to let it go easily. From the number of wrong people you've hired so far, did you learn anything? Can you spot a wrong employee now? And if yes, what? How can you tell?
Yeah, good question. I think it matters less their capability and more their mindset, right? And I know this sounds like some woo-woo shit, but like, it's also culture, right? So like, there's some places where it's like, oh, we want to make sure you're a fit for our culture. Culture matters more than anything, right? And their mindset matters just about the same, right? So, and that's part of the culture is kind of the growth mindset where, I've always said I could do anything. Like, you give me any job and I'm going to figure out how to be good at it. You put me anywhere in the organization, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it well. Right. And I can learn anything. And, if you got me digging a ditch, I'm going to be your best ditch digger. Right. And I'm going to find out how to make that shit more efficient. And we're going to do good. And what you want to hire is people like that, right? Where they may not have the skills today, but if they have the right perspective and the right mentality and they mesh with you, that they're going to be valuable. It may take a little bit of investment, but the return that they're going to provide is exponentially more than you hire somebody for their skill and then they don't have anything else on top of it, right? And they just show up and they do the one thing that you kind of hired and paid them to do. And it's just like, you kind of want more and you want, and I'm not saying you like expect people to do more than their jobs and their job. I'm not saying like, oh, this has to be their life. I'm not talking about like a toxic work culture or anything like that. I'm just saying like you could hire somebody for a skill and they could answer all the questions correctly. That does not mean that they will be a good fit for the organization. There's people that I've hired that knew the right answers and were just the wrong people. And especially in a startup. Yeah.
Grant, what can I say? You've had a remarkable career. We didn't really have enough time to get into all of that. I was curious to know what you were doing as a VP and many other things, but just from the way you speak, from the information you shared, I think you have given a lot of insight into what you learned along your journey. And a lot of that, I'm sure it's going to be very useful for all people listening to this, both individuals and businesses. And I must give you this. That's been a kind of a bombastic session. The first on cybersecurity. And it's packed, filled with a lot of information. And I can't but thank you a lot for taking the time to come join us and share all of that. Even though it has been, as listening to you, just like drinking water out of a fire hose, to be honest. It's a whole lot to take in. No, that's great. Thank you so much for coming,
Thanks for
joining us today. Grant, for anyone looking to find you online, where can they find you or maybe your company?
Yeah. So the company is DarkHorse Security. So if it's darkhorse.sh is the website. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place to find me. And I am Grant McCracken on LinkedIn. And if you look up Grant McCracken DarkHorse, should pop up as me. It'll look like me, and that'll be me.
On that note, we bring this episode to an end. Thank you so much for watching till the very end. And don't forget, of course, to like, share. Please do subscribe and also comment. Let's know what you think about the episode so we can always make it better for you. By we, I mean myself and the guest. Until the next episode, stay safe out there. Bye.